Welcome to the Beyond the Reef podcast, where I talk to experts and researchers in the reef aquarium hobby, discussing a broad range of topics from biology to equipment and chemistry. We take a deep dive into our guests' methods, techniques, and top reef keeping tips. My name is Adam Sutherland, and I am the owner-operator of Frag Garage Corals, based out of British Columbia, Canada. My guest for this episode is Adam Derrickson of Battle Corals, and you probably know Adam and Battle Corals. He's been selling SPS primarily for the past 10 plus years, based out of Wisconsin, United States. We had a super fun conversation talking about corals, parameters, all the kind of things that I wanted to touch on. I think we really covered a lot. We were hoping to find some points of contention or things we did differently. I think we found a few things, so hopefully you get some good nuggets out of this one. And if you want to check out Adam's corals, check them out at battlecorals.com. I will link to his website and any resources that we discuss in this episode. If you want to support this podcast, the best thing you can do is like, subscribe, share, write us a review, and if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions for a future episode, please reach out. So let the Battle of the Atoms commence. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Very cool, very cool. I mean, I really appreciate the invite. I'm sorry it took me a couple tries to lock it in, but it's sometimes just with kids and whatnot, it can get a little difficult. But but we found a window, and here we are. It's perfect.
Yeah, so in the theme of the Battle of the Atoms, I was hoping we could talk about some, I don't know, either controversy in the industry, maybe we can find some things we disagree on and kind of, talk about those things. So
sure.
Yeah, I guess,
I'm a pretty easygoing guy though, so it might be tough.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we agree on a lot, so.
Yeah, well, I've seen, I did scour your your Instagram thing, and you've got some pretty impressive looking corals. So I think that I would imagine a lot of our kind of methodologies are probably not too far, away from each other. In fact, I'm more impressed by what you have than what I have here, to be honest with you.
You
but,
never know.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about aquaculture is you're just in a constant state of destroying your colonies. I mean, I do not ever have like thriving, growing, massive colonies anymore. That's what hobbyists have, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Although I can't do this, but maybe for the video, if you look really close in the corner of the screen, that little tank in the corner is going to be my first display tank in probably 10 years now.
Oh, nice.
And I got a funny little plan. It's kind of an experimental tank, but my plan is to actually grow out some pieces in there like I never have, like I haven't in a long time, and kind of let them do their thing. So with any luck.
Yeah, I'm always surprised how many acros, once they get to a certain size, how they table. Like species that you wouldn't necessarily think would be a tabling.
Oh yeah,
acropora,
I think most acros, at least most that are collected, especially Australian, are tabling, and it's kind of funny because, a lot of people ask for tables and that sort of thing, and I kind of tell them even millies, most corals table. And when you look at these pictures, like I don't know if you've seen the scroll on Apple TV. Even they do this kind of hover over these reefs, and it's like 90% tables. It just, I've always kind of said what we have in our tanks is kind of like the bonsai version of the wild piece. Like everything kind of gets a little bit more miniaturized, and but if you grow them out long enough, they do eventually table most of the time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, just tell the customer, it's not a big deal. You just have to grow it out to 10, 12 inches, 14 inches. Not a big deal.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
It's true though. I mean, like structurally, that is pretty consistent. Like I said, especially with Australian stuff, it seems like most of that stuff, when it's mature, it does that. But again, it's been a long time. Minus maybe some big ephilos I have here. I don't think I've got anything over like 5-6 inches. It just, I mean, when you sell coral for a living, you have to like destroy them all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're kind of being
it's the nature
asshole.
of the beast. Right. Anyway, I don't know if we can fight about that, but
no, I guess not. But so I was going to ask you about kind of pushing the limits of certain parameters and kind of how far you take things, because one thing I think I heard in an interview with you and Keith Reef Bum was I think you run your salinity higher than the natural seawater kind of.
Funny. Well, yeah. All right, I'll preface this by saying like my methods are pretty are not static at all. I mean, I really am kind of in a constant state of, does this work? Does that work? But the story goes years and years ago. I kind of haphazardly wound up with higher salinity, probably because my laziness, just not checking it or whatever. I think I was doing, I was packing up orders and just turning on a pump and kind of filling in water a little bit, haphazardly, not in any way balancing the system. And my salinity shot up to about 1028. And I mean, we're talking back in the basement days, so maybe 2012, 13. And I just noticed things look pretty good. So I mean that no real scientific method there, but it's been a long time. I had been running that for a while, and even in this past year, I've decided to kind of bring it back down. And I don't necessarily have a reason for that. It wasn't like, oh, things aren't doing right, I'm going to try this. I think it almost just kind of happened organically on its own. And I'm back down to 1025, and consequently, I can't say I've had any major shifts or changes in anything. I think that if anything, like that might have been boosting my alkalinity a little bit. I was using Tropic Marin, which was a little low, and that might have been helping that. I've since switched to a Red Sea that has way higher alkalinity, and maybe that kind of played into my subconsciously not, if water changes would kind of boost my elk a little bit and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So some of these things kind of happen in the back of your brain, and they just kind of do their thing. But
yeah, I mean, my understanding is the higher salinity is kind of like faster metabolism, so you might get more growth. Also, like everything's going to be a little bit more saturated after a water change, so.
Right.
Essentially you're kind of topping up some of those trace and stuff a little bit more. But my concern with selling corals at a higher salinity is if you're shipping to someone that say has let their salinity drift down, and say yours is 0.28 and theirs is they might not know, but it might be 0.23 or 0.22. It might not be in a dangerous range, but it's lower. And then if they get a coral from someone that's shipping higher salinity, I find that can kill corals, or at least give them some issues on, adjustment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and even that actually makes sense to me. Probably not a bad thing. Mine was definitely higher than the normal, than the norm for sure, and even other parameters too. Massive shifts, when they arrive, could certainly be problematic. I could see that, and again, that didn't really play as it probably should have, but it didn't really play into my decision to bring it back down. But thinking about it now, that actually makes sense to have that. In fact, I've had customers in the past, shoot me an email saying like, "Dude, are you sure like this is right? Like I tested some of your parameters, and your salinity is way high, and so forth." And I guess this is. Like I said, my methods are kind of in a constant state of growth and change. I'm not locked into anything specific, really, at any time. When it comes to that sort of thing, we could go on about. I'm sure we'll touch on some of the other things and stuff that I do, but we'll leave that till we get there.
Yeah, another thing as far as like corals adjusting to say customers' systems, because I think this is important for people that are buying coral to understand. Like, are you using metal halides as like one of your main light sources? I think you're pretty big on the halides, right?
It like yes and no. Like I've got a lot of mother colonies still under halides. I'm still running Iwasaki's even. In fact, I bought the last line of kind of the last productions of those 65Ks.
Oh, nice! I remember those.
yeah, and I've got them. I've got on old magnetic ballast. Actually, they're wonderful, and I think I've got 12 left. I have a tank that has 4 of them over that, so I have at least. And I've been pushing my bulbs to the max. I've been actually getting about 2 or 3 years out of them just because. So kind of by my math, I've probably got another like 5-6 years worth of Iwasaki's if I want to. But I do have, I'm running all 3 lighting now. So, generally, I even have kind of the gimmick on my site is you can buy corals based on what lighting they were grown under.
Cool.
And most of my mothers are split among all the lighting at this point. But I do have the halide tank. I will say all my frags, minus some of the little satellite frags that end up in the halide tank, are all under LEDs. So generally, and I'm sure as I go, and replacing 15 T5 bulbs at a time kind of sucks as well.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that even more so, but I'm not running as many T5s as I used to either. The progression is pretty much gone. Slowly more and more LEDs make their way up there, and as that happens, the older lights are moving out. But yes, in fact, I'm still running halides. They work wonderful. I mean, I always go back and forth. When I get asked all the time, like, what do you think really is the best? And it's hard not to say T5, only because like T5 offers them something that like point lighting doesn't. I think when you get it's a coverage thing. I think to me it's a coverage thing. And when I take two corals and I can kind of compare them, this is the one that was growing under the halides, and this is the T5 version. The T5 has something else, maybe a little. It just has something a little extra, and I think again, it's just there's no shading at all. Like all those little nooks and crannies are receiving light, and that's the main difference there. But to answer your question, yeah, still running all three lights. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like you're doing it in a way that's kind of giving the customer some transparency on it, because I mean, my concern, I think, with metal halides is like they are a great light, but how well. It's been a while since I've bought any coral from anybody growing anything under halides, but it's kind of nice to sell corals when you know that you can achieve the same lighting as them. And let's face it, like, I mean, we need to kind of get away from metal halides. It's probably like an industry that's kind of starting to get, slowly.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, they don't make Iwasaki's anymore. I think radiums are done. I mean, like it is like a fleeting industry for sure. And I mean, the writing's been on the wall for a while on that. But again, I bought the last like bulk box that I could, and I intend to run them. Like I said, probably another 6 years. And but again, it's a smaller part of my system at this point for sure. Like most of my stuff is under LEDs. For what it's worth. It's almost kind of a novelty at this point.
Yeah.
But
so what's the kind of par range you're running? Like what have you found to be kind of the maximum you can hit SPS with, and like what's your kind of range generally?
Well, of course, the halides, the 65s, of course, are pretty high in par. I kind of got out of the habit of measuring under the water at the actual coral, so I like to just measure right at the surface. It kind of gives me like a standard, and it's dry, so it's obviously going to drop, a bit when you're in the water. But I like to see, anywhere between like 400 to 800, even, under the halides, I get about 800. Wow. Of course, that's at the surface. And, at the actual corals, usually it measures around 300, 400, I would say, at the most.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably similar to what I'm doing too. So, yeah. Okay. Well, we can't find anything too different.
Well, par is par. I mean, I know that, I've got some low light corals, and I've actually got a few that look better in the corner and that sort of thing. But, generally, my intention, my goal is growth and that sort of thing. So, if more par is going to give me more growth, then that's certainly what I'm gonna do. Yeah. Kind of from the industrial standpoint of it all. But
yeah. I guess another thing I wanted to ask you about was flow, because I saw you make a little post on Instagram the other day with your just absolutely ripping flow. So you don't think that, we're talking mostly SPS here. You don't think that as long as you're not blowing off the tissue, you're not giving them too much flow? Like you think you can just absolutely turbulent blast them?
I mean, I think that I'm kind of on the higher end of that. And I will say this, like that video is like from a year, like I think it was about a year old. I like did a remix or something.
Yeah.
But my tanks are all shallow, and they're hard, like flow is hard in a shallow tank. It's a big rectangle, about 11 foot by 4 foot. So it's really not a conventional tank as far as like creating the kind of right kind of flow that you need anyway. I settled on 4 gyres in each corner, and one kind of like the video, one runs this direction for about 5 minutes, and then it turns and it does that way, and it's been really effective, but maybe a little excessive. That video is almost kind of a glory. Yeah, what the word is, but most of the tanks I have actually have found that. I have the smaller gyres, the 350, I think is what they are. Yeah. And not quite as strong as in that video, but I would say that as long as you're not blasting the tissue off, you almost can't have enough flow. Yeah. For what it's worth. Yeah. So maybe we could fight about that.
I've wondered if there is, if you compare to the ocean, if you want to kind of give the polyp a little bit of a break sometimes, if it's like if there's some merit in, like, say, if you do have a program that's pretty strong, petering off a little bit for a few hours a day, like what's your thoughts on lower flow at night? Because like my experience in the ocean is that it's not necessarily calmer at night. It can be a lot rougher at night. So, I don't really quite buy into that lower flow at night thing. But I guess one of the benefits of that is that the polyps might have more of an opportunity to pull in food in a lower flow situation. But do you just run your pumps like nonstop?
I'm kind of all over the place. I have
Yeah.
ventured into the night mode. I've got the wave engines on most of those tanks, and you can program night modes pretty easy with that. But again, I've gone back and forth, sometimes thinking, oh, this seems like a great idea. Let's let, exactly what you said, let's let the polyps kind of come out and see what they can do. And other times I'm like, well, this tank is on night mode, and the coral doesn't look so great, so maybe I'm gonna, but this tank over here like doesn't have that. The pumps run 24 hours, strong, and so I'll notice subtle differences like that, and that usually will dictate, whether or not I'm going to change this or that when it comes to stuff like that. But I've kind of gone down the night mode rabbit hole, and certainly not sold that it's any better or like going to provide any. And I think maybe for the fish, because they sleep, they might sleep a little better in the nooks, but as of now, I don't have. I think I took the night mode off of all the tanks.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
I think it's a hard thing to quantify. It's hard to know sometimes, like these little tweaks, especially like people will message me about, my lighting schedule, and they want to make some like little tiny point changes, and the percentage of the white or the blue. It's like these little things are so hard to see a difference. Like you have to just change one thing, let it play out for a while. Like, I don't know. It's hard to know, but like you say, I mean, we're always changing things and hopefully learning along the way. I mean,
yeah, well, that's the thing. You just kind of have to observe, and I guess the better observer you are, kind of like what you do and kind of what happens when you do these things, certainly the better you'll be at taking care of them. I guess that's, if I've learned anything in maybe the 15, 20 years I've been doing this, to notice really tiny nuanced things that, other people might not notice, and then act on whatever, I still get terrified when I see skeletons, and I lose coral all the time. I mean, there's no like, it's just, especially acros, that they just die. You look at them wrong and they die. And maybe there's a reason, maybe not, but, it has been interesting. Obviously a lot of the methods that we didn't have years ago, like some of the testing, obviously the ICP and like even the bacterial testing is kind of a new frontier for maybe solving some problems that we haven't been able to address. But it's just, I just tell people, don't get too attached to your acros, man. Sometimes they just die, and there's nothing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes it's when they look their absolute best too. That's when it really gets
right.
me.
Like when there's no reason at all. I mean, that's kind of the thing where, I guess I kind of have a process too. Like if I go upstairs and I see, if there's a couple skeletons and maybe one coral with a little white patch, my heart flutters a little bit, but, obviously I try not to panic. The first thing you do is you look at every other coral, or, I have doubles and triplicates of just about everything in different systems. And, you can determine pretty quickly whether it's maybe a global problem, if it's maybe a problem with salt or RO water, or a fluke with just one particular coral. If I have 4 different colonies of the same piece and only one's doing it in this tank, I just call it a fluke and I try not to think about it. And if that's all that happens, then that's it. But when you start seeing patterns, then you can get a little nervous, and that's when you got to act a little more aggressively to, try to figure out what's going on. But, it's a process, really. I mean, you kind of like, you do it long enough, and some of these things just kind of become, not routine, but like you have a method,
Do you have you tried any bacterial treatments for corals? I mean, that's a little bit of a hot topic right now, especially treating like a whole tank. Like
like Cipro and stuff?
Yeah, like I'm not opposed to it as a, quarantine separate system treatment. I'm a little bit hesitant about doing a whole system, and I think there's some studies going on right now with oxalic acid, which is a less broad spectrum versus the Cipro, so it might be a little safer. But have you treated anything outside of the tank with bacteria, or treated the tank itself?
No, but I've been very interested in. I've kind of been following some of these threads and stuff over on Reef to Reef. You're exactly right. Some people are, very opposed to it, and have a lot of reasons, and it seems like these people seem to kind of know what they're talking about as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of people have also treated without any problems and had success. So I'm kind of on the fence. With that,
Yeah, I mean,
like kind of a hot topic, like you said. It'd be interesting to kind of see a little bit more long-term results of some of these tanks that have been treated and that sort of thing. I mean, again, it's like kind of a new frontier, and the guy who Aquabiomics, I don't know exactly
Eli, yeah,
Eli, really smart guy. I mean, I think that like what he's got going on is, like I said, pretty much a new frontier in that regard. But I'm always kind of like cautiously, like I kind of like stuff like that. I kind of have to take baby steps into.
Yeah, and I think with Eli and Aquabiomics, like his system is going to get better and better as he gets more data. So,
Right,
like even if
right.
you think it's kind of early and you're like, I just don't know if it's, there yet. It's like the more data he gets, because he takes information as well. Like, how's the tank actually doing? Do you have any issues with this or whatever? I think there's like a questionnaire. So he can factor all of that in and start to see some of the things that are, have a correlation between, certain issues or whatever. So I think it's going to get better and better. Like, it'd be nice if it was, I don't know, like for me, it's a little expensive to ship a kit there, and probably the turnaround is pretty long. So I actually haven't done one yet, but I do intend to. And it's like at this point, think about it like you're supporting, a GoFundMe or something, is something that's going to pay off kind of more in the future. Because I do think it's like you say, when you see a certain one coral like go on you, or there's some little random issue that just doesn't makes sense. Like my theory is often it is bacterial related, more than these swings and things we can sometimes
There's some people
blame
that,
it on.
that swear by it. I mean, I know that there's some people that in fact, I had a customer down in Florida who, a real smart guy, he kind of headed up like a research facility. I mean, he was doing like real scientific stuff, and he was losing coral. He was losing coral. Same old thing. Like, I don't know what's going on. You try everything, you throw everything at the wall, and he did end up dosing, and sure enough, his problems went away. So, a pretty good testimonial. But again, it's still it's kind of new. There aren't any real long term. I've heard people kind of concerned about that the bacteria would then come back stronger. Like the whole, I mean, antibiotic, kind of cautionary tale type stuff. I don't know. Again, it just seems like you said, there's not a whole lot of data, not enough data for me. I mean, I don't know if I'm about to trailblaze on this one yet, but I have been following along. I mean, like I said, even this friend of mine, I know that. I'm sorry. Tidal Gardens in Ohio. I mean, he had a little video. I think that's his name. He had a video where he did his whole system. I mean, a big commercial system, and I think he had some. I mean, it seems like I've heard more success stories than horror stories. People dosing at least Cipro and I think amoxicillin even. So.
Yeah, I mean, like running Chemiclean, which is erythromycin, I believe. Like I do that a couple times a year as a maintenance bacteria thing, and I don't have any cyano. It's I do find that the corals look better after, better polyp extension. Sometimes just little issues seem to, I don't know. I mean, I think it's affecting more of the bad strains of bacteria that are in the water versus the good ones that are on the surfaces, but I can't say for sure. Actually, I don't know if you followed any of Dong Zhao, I think. I can't remember his company. He's been on Reef Bum a couple times, and he has a pharmaceutical background. So those episodes are really good for
see, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to pay more attention to. Like people that could say, this is how it works, this is what it does, this is what it doesn't do,
Totally.
And, this is what you can expect and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But,
and I mean, something to consider too. I mean, we're taking this, some people are taking this really seriously, but it's like the farming industry has been using antibiotics for years and years and years. And, that's kind of part of our diet and part of our lives. It's kind of, obviously not saying it's not good. Like I try to eat meat that's antibiotic free if possible, but I mean, we've been, consuming, products with
that's true.
Those things for years and years. So I don't know. We'll have to see how this goes. And I think as more studies come out, I think we'll learn more. But do you dose any bacteria in your systems, like for prophylactic?
It's funny. I mean, in all these years, I hadn't ever done it, and I just I've known Sonny, Pro Corals, forever, and he's a real proponent of bacteria. He was doing vodka, way back, kind of one of the pioneers even of that. And he has his Instagram has kind of started to take off a little bit, and he kind of convinced me to give it a try. Mm-hmm. At least, I have a couple systems. My backup system is the system where I decide to try stuff like that. So it's kind of low nutrient anyway, but oddly enough, I've been doing like he is a proponent of coral snow, that sort of stuff. It's like a flocculant for just to clear water, and kind of the other caveat of that was to dose bacteria then. And I guess I've just decided to start doing that. In fact, I've got the bottle right in front of me. It's the Coralin little Zeobac. Oddly enough, I need to buy more. That's why it's right in front of me. But
it's a tiny little bottle.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if I was going to use it. I kind of like I said, I baby-step into these things, and I've only been doing it about a month now. So I don't really know what to expect. It may work. A lot of these things kind of come and go for me. Like, I remember even like when Aquapower came out, or amino acid and that sort of thing. And maybe you might want to touch on that later. But I don't. Like I dabbled and then I never committed to it, that sort of thing. So at this point, I can't say that I'm going to commit to that forever. But my backup system is generally my let's see if this works tank, and I guess we'll see if it works.
Yeah,
it's a really low. It's a low nutrient system already, so I don't know that it even needs it. But that's where I dabble.
Yeah, I think putting some different strains of bacteria in is probably not going to do anything bad, unless you're rock bottom nutrients and you're adding more nitrifiers. But I've added a few strains of different things. It's because our tanks are always kind of cultivating whatever direction they want to go in. It's we don't really have that much control of what's going on in the biome of the tank. So if there are some good strains in these bottles, it could be worthwhile. But I've always been I've always used real live rock in my systems. I have rock back from my first ever tank 20 plus years ago, and I've always started tanks from real rock. So
I think that makes a difference too. Actually, I do think that makes a difference, and it's kind of one of the things that's lacking even with a lot of modern systems. But you just got that bacteria.
Are you running much live rock in your sumps and whatnot? Do you have a lot of rock in your systems? Or?
I do. When I set up I built a new shop back in 2016. That's kind of what I've got now, and it's a lot bigger system. When I did that, I bought a 1,000-pound crate of rock from Marco, a bunch of dry rock. Of course, my old system had, kind of like you, I had all sorts of rock from back in the day, which I still have. But when I started the system, I started the main system with only the Marco rock, and all the old rock went into the backup system, which oddly enough has just done well since, it kind of has just done well. It's like the tank that, the little engine that always can. But I had in the first couple of years, and even still, I think, I don't know that the dry rock, it's certainly a different product in that regard, but kind of random algae that grows on it that, just, I guess I'm not entirely sold on it. But yes, I do have a ton of it. Most of it is now in the dark. I kind of have a cryptic zone in my sump, and that system's been set up since 2016, so it's well established at this point. Yeah. But none of the original live rock that I had from back in the day went into the main, and the first couple of years were a little, pun intended, a little rocky. Yeah. Just I think solely because of the starting off with the dry rock, and I did use water. I transferred a lot of water from the old system, but I didn't transfer any of the live rock. It was almost kind of an experiment. But needless to say, the backup system that was set up at the same time just continued to tick. It never had it just continued to run as if nothing happened. I had to relocate everything, and the live rock probably had a lot to do with that as well.
So. Yeah. No, definitely. I do find that the manufactured rock, it's not as porous as the real live rock either. So I think, you're just not getting the same kind of surface area. But a couple people I have talked to on this podcast, there's Ray from Pirates Reef and Leonardo's Reef. Both of those guys don't really run much rock. Leo doesn't even have any rock in his sumps. His sumps are just basically a protein skimmer, return pump, whatever baffles.
Interesting.
But there's nothing in there. So the system is literally just corals, racks, fish and water. So it makes you kind of wonder, are the corals and the surfaces of the glass and the racks, is that enough, to obviously for him.
So he has no other he has no other area for colonization of bacteria? Like,
No,
I mean,
it's
there's no
literally just
interesting
the corals and whatnot. And I think something that's kind of cool about that is if you're looking to problem solve, similar to not having a sand bed, it's like one less thing to have to look at to be like, okay, this could be, holding phosphates or leaching this or.
Right, which I believe a lot of the Marco rock. I mean, contrary to maybe popular belief, I think that I had issues with the Marco rock, and like I said, I had 1,000 pounds of it when I first started.
Yeah.
And I've seen Leo's pictures, man. There's whatever he's doing.
Yeah.
Like his system is working. His system's working for sure. So I mean, that's
Yeah.
something to consider. And these are kind of things like I hear that, and then it makes me think, maybe I'll start ripping live rock out, or at the very least, maybe again start messing with the backup system and see if I can tweak some things in that regard. But
Yeah.
that's interesting. So the other guy you said also
Ray Pirates Reef.
Yes.
Ray. He said he just has like a couple chunks or whatever, but it's not. Like I've got like I don't know in my 350. My SPS system, I've got lots of rock in the middle chamber. It's a big cryptic sump with, I don't know, probably 100 pounds of rock or something like that down there. And, I take it out once or twice a year and blast all the detritus off. And the system seems a little happier after that. But
interesting. See, that's something too I never considered. But I for a while I tried to kind of get trap detritus and do that sort of thing, and I kind of gave up on that. But one thing I've never done as a means of like maintenance was actually take rock out and blast it. I guess I had never even considered that, but again, if you say things look better afterwards, I'll put it on my list of things to try for sure.
Yeah, and that's actually something I kind of want to bring up. I'm going to do these sort of fact check episodes every once in a while, and we want to talk about detritus and what it actually holds and what it leaches, and because I'd like to understand it a little bit better to kind of know some of the risks. But it's possible that if you have a system with a lot of detritus, it might be holding some bacteria that could get onto your corals and cause issues. It could be kind of a breeding ground for some of that stuff, but at the same time it could be a breeding ground for some good stuff too. I'm not really sure. So
right, that's kind of what they say. In fact, I mean, a lot of people say, at least like, I mean, at this point, I had probably got a couple inches of muck in the bottom of my sump, and I used to back in the good old days. I would in the basement. I had a stock tank, and like every month, I would just blast it. This is my water change was this. I would take a propeller pump, shut everything off, blast it, and start turn it all up, and then siphon all that out in one big one big swell. And so it would get all the detritus off. The system I have now doesn't really allow that. I mean, it'd be kind of difficult for me to do that. But I've heard a lot of people say like, "Oh no, that detritus, it's just inert. There's nothing to worry about there." As far as like phosphate bombs and that sort of thing. In fact, there was a post on that bulk Reef supply mentioned something about cloudy. I can't remember exactly what it was. Having to do with like storing up detritus and like making your tank cloudy for a while, and that it might actually be a good thing. I think it was kind of like meant to be a little humorous or something, but it did make me wonder. Or they might have posted something about it in the wild, like there's a lot of crap in the water. I mean, it's not crystal clear by any means, and I think that's kind of where they were going with that. But either way, I mean. I've gone back and forth on detritus. Like worked really hard, mechanical filtration, everything I can to try to get rid of it, and then said, I'm not going to do this anymore, and let's see what happens. I don't know if I've ever had any like major shift one way or the other, but I do think if I took a pump and blasted my sump now and let it flow through the tank,
it'd probably be bad.
There might be a problem. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't think it would be good.
One thing I can say about since I just did a big rock clean in the sump a couple weeks ago, I did actually get a little bit of a pH bump afterwards. So I think that's proof that detritus does it is a breathing organism basically. So it is actually putting CO2. It's breathing oxygen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
See, that actually makes sense to me.
Yeah,
that actually makes sense to me. Even turning back a little bit. Do you know about those two guys? Do they have a lot of fish in those systems, or I mean, any?
I'm not sure actually. I mean, I would imagine.
It just seems like there has to be something that would have to. I mean, at least that's maybe that's just the old train of thought. But something to kind of maintain, that biological filtration, all that sort of stuff. But I could see if you had a really low fish load that you could get away with, very little biological filtration in that regard. But just one of those things. I mean, obviously, again, the proof is in the pictures. those guys have nice looking corals. So there's, their methods certainly are working.
Yeah.
Just
My
again,
understanding is both of those guys feed heavy and have probably a pretty big fish load. So, I mean, but you get enough coral, you get enough large colonies, and they suck nutrients up, but.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, I did an article. I mean, I used to write a lot of articles over on Reef to Reef that touches exactly on that, about how, like a frag tank is essentially kind of a refugium in that regard. Mm-hmm. That it's just, I mean, the nutrients are going somewhere a lot of times into the coral, even if you're not running, an actual refugium or something like a scrubber or something. That kind of thing where are the nutrients going?
Yeah.
And sure enough, the corals are taking them up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I guess I wanted to ask you about, we were talking about limits of things that you pushed. It looks like one of your systems you're running super high nutrients, whether that is an intentional thing or not.
No. I'll tell you what that is. I can give you the quick backstory. So my system is composed of 6 large tanks, like 11 foot by 4 foot. About a year ago, I decided to isolate one, and this is kind of going to be an experiment tank. But all I did is I turned the valve off and isolated it, and I pulled a couple of my larger fish, and I put it in there, and I also had some keto growing in there that I think was continuing to. It wasn't really being tended very well, so I was feeding the tank really heavy, and I think there was this continual die-off of keto under itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it was like the blinking 200 and that sort of thing. The good news is I haven't put any coral in that tank yet, but I've got kind of a cool plan for that. Maybe I'll touch on that later. But the FOS is down to I'm below blinking 200 now. I think it was blinking. It was at 130 maybe or something. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the nitrate was acceptable. I can't remember exactly what it was, but no, that was at its worst.
Yeah.
When it was just a food bomb, dead, dying, macro and that sort of thing. And no, I don't think any coral would have done so well in there. But,
no, I don't think so.
It was kind of a fluke. No, nothing. Only fish in that tank at this point. Now it's actually, I've kind of relocated the fish and I've spread them out a little bit in my backup. There's one fish in there now, and the system is kind of leveling off. But you kind of got me thinking. I may pull all the live rock out of that tank and see what happens. You kind of got me thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's a more scientific kind of way of doing things. Hey, like I said, it's you're really isolating exactly the things that you're doing, it's just less factors. So yeah, it could be something to it. I guess if you or I wanted to change the sort of rock profile of our systems, just take out, 20%, give it some time, another 20, do it over a batch of, but I like the idea of that, because then what's going to be in your sump is you can siphon that detritus, no problem, right? There's nothing, for it to kind of hold on to. So it's super easy to siphon out.
I mean, it actually makes sense.
Yeah, especially with a shop vac, which is a wet shop vac, super handy. I don't know if you have one around your shop, but
I do, but I've never done that before. That sounds like a good idea. I did nice. Actually when I built. When I built the system, I did have a plan, because my method before, like I said, was to just shut the pumps off and fill the sump with all the cloudy water and drain it. I did put a bulkhead with a drain on the sump for that purpose. I did have an intention of doing that, and I've never done it yet to this day.
Yeah.
But where I would just shut the water off, let the sump fill, crank the pumps and turn everything up, and then drain all that water out. That would be my water change.
So is there anything else you would say you've kind of pushed the limits on, say alkalinity, or any certain trace that you've seen you push the limits on where you've actually seen a benefit?
A while back, I think when the kind of the Triton test first came around, of course I got one done, and I had 0 iodine. And I think a lot of people did. I don't know if it was a thing. I don't know if it just didn't. If it was a testing thing, but at the time, this is still back in the basement days. But I do remember that. I think iodine and potassium were kind of that was kind of the thing even at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember even thinking a lot of my tissue looked kind of. I mean, it was kind of thin, even flaky, maybe even around the edges. Mm-hmm. And I do remember seeing a pretty dramatic improvement after I started dosing iodine. And again, I don't know, this is kind of anecdotal stuff, but turning back the clock, I mean, it could have been so many other factors. It was the first time like that we had these kind of insights available to us. You know, I mean, with the Triton test and that sort of thing. But that was one of the only times I could say like I got these results and I added this, and then I kind of saw what I think was a relative improvement.
Yeah.
You know, other than that, like it's pretty much touch and go for me daily. Otherwise. You know.
Yeah, as far as alkalinity, have you ever run it on the higher side? Like I assume you're in the 8 to 9 range,
you know,
somewhere in there.
I'll tell you what, this is just even a recent thing. You know, like I said, I had been using Tropic Mare, and that's a whole other story, but I ended up going with Red Sea, and kind of almost by accident got the bucket that has the really high elk. I don't know if it's the red or the blue, whatever it is. I got a whole pallet of that, and I thought, okay, well, since I've got this high alkalinity, maybe I'll try to boost the system, and we'll see if we can it'll wash out with water changes. And I did, and I probably got up to 9, and it no good. It was no good at all. I mean, a lot of, you know, the tank hasn't looked that bad in a long time, kind of thing. I don't know if it ever looked that bad. This is just probably about a year ago now, maybe 9-10 months ago. Needless to say, I kind of let it come back down. I know some people can run into 12s, you know, and I don't know if it's just my corals used to it. I really don't know, but in my experience, anytime I try to like boost elk even a little bit, my corals don't like it, and it's just you know, just one of those things.
Yeah, no, it's weird. I mean, I do remember hearing about, this is more like 10 years ago or so, but people were running alkalinity on their systems in the 10 to 12 range. And I mean, that's just so far from natural seawater that, you know, it's just,
right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, and a lot of people talk about like nutrients, like higher nutrients, you can get away with higher elk. And I don't know if there's any correlation there at all. I think that just is one of those, like, it kind of makes you feel good. You know, like I don't know that there was ever any connection between those other than it kind of sounded good to say, perhaps. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, that's fine. What is your kind of sweet spot for nutrient levels, would you say? Like, what are you kind of happy with and notice things look the best?
You know, I guess I usually tell people, you know, low but detectable. You know, not, you know, I've had tanks that have been super high. I mean, back in the day, I definitely had like what I would call dirty tanks. I've never been a huge nutrient kind of chaser anyway, in that regard. But I've been a little more diligent with my little egg things lately, almost just kind of for my own curiosity's sake. Yeah. But, you know, I never tested phosphate ever. The only time I would get a reasonable phosphate measurement was when I sent in a Triton test, you know. And sometimes it was really green, and sometimes it was all right. Again, you know, I don't know that I ever noticed anything dramatic swinging from one to the other. Maybe with a larger system, maybe it's a little more forgiving. You know, I guess I don't really know, but at least compared to like elk, like when elk got a little iffy, it was pretty noticeable. If my phos shot up, you know, I can't say that like, oh, my coral growth has slowed or something to that effect. I guess maybe I'm not as keen in that, but there's nothing that would make me think, oh, this is a problem I need to fix now. But again, I still try to keep it low. I mean, I aim to keep it low but detectable.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I recently I've been kind of pushing my PO4 a little bit higher, and I've noticed some corals really like it. Like millies seem to like more phosphates for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, I used to test kind of, I would occasionally get a test at 0, and then it was kind of 0.2, 0.3, and that sort of seemed better. But then I was like, I just really want to ensure that it's in there. So I kind of got the level up to like 0.1 kind of range, and that's when like some of my, especially like I say, the millies seemed a lot happier. So.
Interesting. So how are you boosting it? Like, what are you doing to?
I was using the Neophos from Brightwell.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but I've switched to another product, a company called Reef Solutions, and they make like I don't know, it's super concentrated, and I think it's just sodium phosphate, so it's only really adding a bit of salt and phosphate, but it seems to work really well. So.
And are you adding any nitrate at all too? Or you kind of, I mean, are you keeping them?
Yeah, my nitrate I've kind of like paid less attention to lately, but it's been testing around kind of 2-ish to 5-ish, and I'm fine with that. So, yeah, I mean, I've had it as high as 25 before, and things look pretty good with that too. So, you know, I don't know.
For the longest time, I really didn't pay much attention to nutrients. It's just one of those things that, you know, I kind of was pretty regular with water changes, and you know, I didn't have a ton of fish, I think. and wasn't really a problem compared to a display with tons of fish, and
Yeah.
like I never had to run like bio balls, or not bio balls, like biomedia, like
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because my fish load was really low. I've never had like tons of fish and had to feed a ton of food, but again, a little different with a display because it's just a little different dynamic there. But
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I the same for me. Like sometimes the solution is just to add more fish, which is kind of a fun solution. It's like, oh, I just get to add more fish, and that'll solve my low nutrient issue, and then I can feed a little bit more.
right. Well, that's kind of why I asked you what you did to. How you actually raised it, but yeah, I don't know. Sorry, man, I don't know what is going on with this
It's
microphone.
okay. I can probably fix it. Well, I'll take it to a little bit of a left turn here. So you were talking a little bit about the Triton test, and I guess I was going to ask you if you kind of do regular ICPs or pay attention to trace much. Are you doing ICPs?
Yeah, not religiously. I guess kind of where I come from, like when things look a little off.
Yeah.
I'm a little more diligent. Like, let's see if I can figure things out. And the flip side to that is when things are looking really good, I'll try to get one in and just see like this is a data point I can maybe work with. But it seems like my results have been pretty consistent. I don't know that I had to do a lot of I had some structural quirks with my floor, and I had to end up doing redoing a lot of my plumbing. This is quite a few years ago, and sure enough, I had probably about 100 feet of 3-inch PVC, and I had massive tin for a couple of years actually, and
really?
it just kind of gradually went down, and that's something I would have never known had I not have had the Triton at my disposal. It wasn't great. The first things didn't go so great, but just a good. A way to at least have an insight into what's going on with your tank, because I don't think I would have been able to determine. Oh, it's probably the tin from the PVC. I wouldn't have had that insight.
Yeah.
So again, there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. I kind of just had to ride it out, and I did water treat that sort of thing. But I've never had like a huge red flag where like, oh, although. I'm going to kind of change the subject, but it's going to come back full circle,
Yep.
I promise. I've been running algae scrubbers. Like a while back, I posted a video of me cleaning this big Deltec cleaning cup thing, and it's a big pain in the butt. And a guy just posted it, and he said something like, "You just get a scrubber, dude," or like, "Try a scrubber, like you won't have to worry about that." And I wasn't about ready to lose the skimmer, but I did. I've since then added a couple scrubbers. Of course, I started with the backup system, and now the main has a few. And someone mentioned, if you're going to run a scrubber, you probably want to start dosing trace elements. Mm-hmm. And actually, I can even bring this a little closer to home. I got like it has an 8 in the logo. I can't remember exactly what it was, but Todd from
Captivate.
Yes, Todd from Champion Lighting.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, it turns out that is pretty high in nickel and iodine. Oddly enough, I did get I sent a Triton test in about a week or two ago, and I've never had iodine or nickel off the charts like I do now. So I've been overdosing the traces for sure. Mm-hmm. Again, a good insight. Without the Triton, I would have I've since stopped dosing. I'll probably maybe do once a week now, not like once a day like they kind of say. But again, I would not have had that insight if I didn't have the Triton test. My iodine would probably be like to the levels that would cause horrible problems. I don't really know like how high it has to be to cause problems, but again, I think it's a good thing it's a good tool to have in the drawer.
Yeah, I think the thing with a lot of those multi-trace element products is like, since the profile of every system is so different, like it's really hard to know exactly what's going to get consumed faster and depending on the tank, right? So yeah, it's a tough one. I talked to Chris Wood, who's just such a well of knowledge, and he said for me, he's like, you can use the MT, but like, if your system's like high in this and super low in this, like you might want to just do the individual bottles and figure out your formula. But it's definitely something you want to take slow. If you're going to add that, I think that product is super concentrated, right? So did you dilute it and dose it?
No, I just put maybe a capful, like in my mains, about 1,200 gallons, and I was just putting maybe 5-10 milliliters a day. And that was maybe about 3 months now it took to get. I should post a picture. Or I could send you a picture, and you could clip it in of the Triton test. But it's like off the chart.
Yeah.
I mean, but just nickel and iodine, like literally off the charts in my backup
Crazy.
and main system now. But up to that point, I had never dosed traces at all. I mean, there's maybe back in the day, like I'll just try this, but never religiously dosed traces or even saw a need to. Just kind of took the advice. Actually, it was Todd that said, "Hey, if you're using scrubber, you probably want to do this." And I don't know that there's a detriment, but I am going to be a little more cautious adding from. I mean, I know that it boosts iodine and nickel quite effectively.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting that it got so high. So you didn't notice from the high iodine and nickel, were you losing anything, or were things kind of tolerating it? Like,
oddly enough, my tank has never looked better.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but like truth be told, like it looks phenomenal. So I will continue to add. I think I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna not do daily. I'm gonna go, maybe weekly. In another month, maybe send in another Triton and kind of see where it is. But coming from a place where I had never dosed trace. I mean, I never really dosed traces at all. Just maybe a monthly water change if I, maybe 2 a month if I was ambitious enough. So. Maybe there's something to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it did boost other traces, but the only noticeable ones were, the iodine and the nickel were off the charts.
Yeah.
But
I wonder.
Nothing that would make me think that it's causing any problems. At this point.
What would you say is what you've noticed? Like, what looks better specifically about the corals with these parameters high? Because it's interesting to note that.
Yeah, well, I mean, growth and color,
Yeah.
I can honestly say. And this is kind of coming off the higher pH thing that I was talking about earlier. So, like, I did have slower growth. And another thing, I'll tell you, like, 3 things kind of happened initially that have kind of spawned this, like, little bit better looking tank. And one was, I kind of jumped on the Kalkwasser wagon a couple of years ago, about a year ago. And, I know some people swear by it. After about a year of Kalkwasser, things did not look good in my tank. I don't know if maybe I got a bad batch. I don't really know, but I kind of kept going with it. Quit the Kalkwasser. I have a 400 gallon per day SpectraPure RO unit, and I might have pushed that membrane a little farther than it wanted to go. Maybe about 2 or 3 years I had on that one.
Ooh, yeah.
So I dropped. So I got, yeah. Well, I mean that's kind of what I'm used to. But the thing is, I don't know if I'll do that again, because hear me out. I got a new membrane. I ditched the Kalkwasser, and like I said, I've kind of been dosing trace elements. Tank went from kind of a slumpy, like, something's wrong. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it seems like growth and color are kind of off, to like, oh, okay, like that's a little more like it. Like, corals that have just kind of been plugging along have perked up tremendously, I will say. And I don't know if I can attribute it to one thing particularly, but those were 3 major things that I did, and I have noticed a considerable difference. Hard to ignore.
Yeah,
kind of improvement. So
you said it
not
was
necessarily
you stopped doing calc. You changed your RO membrane, probably the other filters in there too. And what else did you do?
I'm pretty religious with the other filters. It was just the membrane. And the thing is, the TDS still reads 6 out of the thing, but I think that stuff's getting through. The third thing was started adding that. Well, I added the algae scrubber, which in turn, I bumped it again. Which in turn led me to start adding trace elements. So, it might be, kind of like they might all be working together. And I guess I did change to Red Sea salt, but, I think I was kind of in that tropic marin. I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I was kind of in that tropic marin thing where, a lot of people had problems. I wasn't using the Pro, and I'm not going to bash tropic marin at all.
Yeah.
But out of kind of an abundance of caution, I decided to switch salts. And, that was another thing that changed. That was a pretty global change. But that was 2 years ago, so I don't know if I could say that it was that immediate. But
yeah. So you had some of the. Did you have some from the turkey factory, or was yours?
I did, and I well, here's what I did. And again, I used tropic marin for like over 15 years, and I inevitably will go back to it. It's kind of like an old friend at this point. But I had a couple quirks that I couldn't really explain. And then I heard about all this tropic marin stuff from Turkey, and I went on Bulk Reef and I bought a pallet of, the German salt, and it was just a little suspicious. It was right around that window, like when COVID was. The minutia of that I don't really want to get into, but I wasn't completely confident in the salt, and that I used about half of a pallet of it. And I actually did some tests again in the backup system, started doing major water changes with that salt just to kind of see what happened. I will say what I did see was, kind of what other people had reported was like kind of an oily film on the surface and this kind of flaky white powdery stuff that didn't dissolve. And,
Yeah.
I will say that I don't know that I had any dramatic problems. I know some people had, I wasn't using the Pro, but I know people had problems that they could definitively say, like, this salt is bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that was me. But again, out of an abundance of caution, I swapped. So I bought a pallet of the classic salt, thinking it would be good. I don't know. It's in the shed. I may just use it someday and see how that goes. But inevitably, I'd like to go back to tropic marin. I mean, like I said, it was an old friend. I never had it was the one thing. It was like the one thing that I knew I could rely on. And I don't want to. We don't have to go any further. But inevitably, I will switch back to tropic.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I'm actually switching to tropic marin. I just ordered kind of like a half a pallet of the Pro, and it's made in Germany. But I'm actually switching from Red Sea. And I don't want to. I haven't heard anything too specific, but I know that some things are changing with Red Sea's manufacturing. So,
it's funny. It's like the same thing in reverse. It's like the same thing in reverse now. That when this was happening with tropic marin, everyone was saying switch to Red Sea. And now it's almost like it's happening in reverse. Switch. Everyone's switch back to tropic marin or switch to tropic marin. It's a salt. I mean, I think someone said that no salt company's ever going to not have a problem. I mean, it's just no matter I mean, it's going to happen at some point. Something's going to go wrong, and it is what it is. And some people had a lot of problems, some people didn't. But life goes on, and it seems like whatever the problem was, it's not a problem anymore. I mean, I've actually been talking to more people about that particular salt, and that has seeming like that are switching to it or have been using it, and without any issues.
It's been enough time. I mean, tropic marin was a bad boy for a while, and now wants to be a good boy. It's like
and that's kind of what I said too. Like who's gonna have the better salt? Like the company that if a restaurant serves a bunch of crappy food, or something to that effect, and they get called on it, they're going to clean up their act. I mean, they're going to be on their best behavior, at least, in that regard. And I think, tropic marin, the standard was always super high anyway. So whatever it was a fluke. And again, I'll even say the salt that I have, I'm not even saying that it is bad. I'm saying I was a little suspicious and skeptical and maybe just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But again, kind of a faithful tropic marin user here. We don't have to go any further.
Yeah, no, for sure. Totally. Well, let's take a turn and talk about corals a little bit, which I'm sure, it's probably my favorite thing to talk about, probably. So what's your kind of acquisition process and your kind of feelings on, bringing in maricultured versus, aquacultured stuff that's been in the hobby for a long time? What's your kind of the majority of your collection and kind of how you get your corals?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, I used to obviously trade a lot and that sort of thing, but my entire collection of the signature stuff was all grown out from frags off wild stuff. I mean, I would get even back from Oculus, places like that, or I have a local place, Global Reef Supply. I guess I'll give them a little plug, but to get new stuff, I would generally get 5 or 6 colonies. I didn't have a lot of money back then, but maybe an order of 10 pieces. And every once in a while, a few of them would look nice. I would cut some frags, and most of the corals on my site literally are colonies grown from those frags. The colonies usually die, but the frags, if you're lucky, they'll grow. And that's kind of how my collection was built at this point. I don't do, obviously I don't do a lot of I don't buy, sell. That's not really my, my what I do. But to acquire new pieces, I have to get wild stuff, and I've got a couple. My connections that kind of keep getting better. I've got a guy in Indonesia now, and it's nice to have good sources, but I still prefer to take the piece and grow it out and do it that way. And it's kind of tedious and it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as that goes, it's not like the easy way by any means. But you do end up with a little bit better product, a product that's, if anything, a little hardier and maybe a little more resilient and that sort of thing. But, like versus like, chop shop selling.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree as far as like, especially the maricultured stuff. I've had some nice pieces that I've brought in, and I rebase them like pretty much right away. So I'll like get.
Oh yeah, you got to cut those bases off.
Yeah, many times I'll take a frag off of that colony, and then one day that colony will just start going on me, and the frag that I made from the outer growth is totally fine. So I think I don't know. Colonies just tend to be more sensitive, but I think there are some inherent issues that come in with some of those maricultured pieces, around the base. Like we've talked a little bit on this podcast before about green boring algae. And then potentially there could be something in the iron in the racks that gets into the skeletons as well. I'm not really sure, but you probably noticed the bottom of those bases are rusty.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I've always wondered about that. Like that kind of stuff. Like I'm super paranoid about stuff like that. Like weird things that, in the lagoon really aren't a problem. But, whenever I get maricultures, and the first thing that I get the bandsaw and all that stuff gets cut off. It's just that sort of thing. Like all the coral in the hobby that we have, it did come from somewhere. So anything that's been in the hobby still had to come from somewhere in that regard. And ultimately, the hard part is keeping it alive and then actually growing it out. But a little bit more rewarding, maybe not financially because it's such a slow process, but you've got stuff that's unique to you at the very least, that maybe you can't get. A good example would be my bubble bath unicorn, just kind of a long time classic. Just started off as a green nub, whatever, and just one of those classic, like got better and better looking, and then it's like this thing rocks.
Yeah.
And it's been with me forever now, but. A couple generations in, like people got it and they grow it out and that sort of thing, and it just kind of gets around.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to see it's cool to see when it's a coral that you kind of knew was something unique that you had, and then to see multi-generations of it to a point where you've seen it in all these different tanks grown out into colonies.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty cool. Those are my babies.
Well, and that's usually what I say because, kind of even back to what I touched on, like I don't have a display with like nice sprawling colonies that haven't been touched.
Yeah.
So I see tanks of people like, 3 generations worth of like coral that they got from me, and I'm like, wow, like I've never even seen it look like, I didn't even know it could do that.
Yeah.
Because my colony didn't grow for like 3 years or that sort of thing. It's just always in a state of abuse. So, but it is kind of cool to think like a lot of these pieces I've had a long time that have been, just visit the for sale forums and you see, a lot of people BC this, BC that, and I think it's great as far as I'm concerned. Like just that it's out there and like people have it, and the more longevity it will have, just as a result. So
living vicariously through your kids, your coral kids, a little bit.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Have you had much experience with Malaysian acros?
I don't have a hookup that I know of yet.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them. I know like the Spicosias, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Speciosa, yeah.
Are super popular. They used to come in, every once in a while you would get one, I guess a long time ago, in an Indo shipment, but nothing like what I've seen, the last couple of years it seems like that stuff, the floodgates has kind of opened on that, but impressive stuff. I think they're a little finicky, but
yeah, we've talked about it a bit on the podcast, but it's one of those things where you haven't seen those multi-generation colonies of those Speciosa yet. So I think those would be the ones I would be more likely to buy, as one that's sort of been grown out and fragged and had some a couple years in the hobby, and then it's kind of proven itself to adapt to our tanks.
Right. Well, that essentially is exactly what my collection, like that describes my collection exactly. Like frags that were grown out from that wild piece that certainly are more steadfast in that regard. And once some of these Malaysian pieces have gone through that process, then certainly there'll be more, probably goofy names and more just kind of available as, hobbyists can trade them and sell them just as they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely something with the mariculture industry is... people think they're getting something unique sometimes, but it's very uncommon that you're going to get a piece that isn't, being massively fragged and sent out. Like, these companies that do mariculture, they have to apply for permits to do collection, to actually add broodstock colonies. So, like, I guess we could kind of get into the name game a little. I don't want to linger on it too much, but,
Sure.
like, if a company is shipping mariculture corals and they're just sort of called this species or whatever, like, it's like, where do you have a kind of a universal way to be like, well, I knew this came from, say, Bali Aquarium. Can we just call it that thing instead of having to come up with different new names for it? Like, my problem is seeing different names for the same thing. Like, I don't mind the name thing.
Oh yeah.
I think we need to give things a name to differentiate them, because, like the species, sure, I think that we should try to keep the species in the title, or at least like present it with the coral we're selling. But I like coming up with the names.
Yeah, I've kind of been there, done that. I think I like probably peaked with names maybe 10 years ago, and have just kind of not really taken it seriously, for a while now.
Yeah.
Some of my certain pieces, I'll slap something on there, but like it's, if just look at my site, nothing, it's all goofy as can be. I did put my foot down with rainbow tenuis a couple years ago. And I said, I'm not naming another rainbow tenuis at all. It's just going to be rainbow tenuis, number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever it is. Kind of like zoanthids, where they all kind of look, it's rainbow tenuis. I'm not going to come up with like another silly name and to call this one that looks just like that one, something different, whatever. And I just sell these things as like box, you can get a box of that, of a pack of those things, if that's what you like.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitively said I'm not naming rainbow tenuis anymore.
Yeah, well, and a funny thing about tenuis too is
or Biafra. I guess they're not tenuis. They're actually
I was going to say
Biafra.
that. So that's going to be. I think that's going to be a tough one to stick. Like, it's similar to even the Acan Lord Micromusa thing. Like, it's like, I know I don't want to like take anything away. I love that the science is getting, they're getting a better picture of the differences in species and whatnot, but. Yeah, it's tough when it's like, we recognize this coral as a tenuis, and or the hammer thing with the fibrophilia. It's going to be hard to get that to stick. Like,
oh yeah, it's it's tenuis for sure, and it may run its course. Just as with anything, the more people want it, the more they're going to bring in, and then you get to a point where, kind of everyone's got little frags of rainbow tenuis, and it kind of runs its course. I guess we'll see the next. It seems like the Malaysian stuff is kind of the next thing in line, I think, to kind of take the helm of that.
Yeah, because the Malaysian stuff is wild collected, right? And one thing, like Reef Raft Canada always had really great stuff, and part of that was he brought in a lot of wild like Indo stuff too, right? And I don't know, like. That's where you're going to get those unique morphs and corals that aren't, the same as the maricultured. Like, he would get stuff I'd never seen before. So,
oh yeah, I'll never forget when they kind of came onto the scene. That was like, it was in Canada, so they had a lot of trouble. Everyone just kind of went crazy for it, but they had a lot of trouble getting it out of Canada. Or no, you're in Canada.
Yeah, I am.
So you're in the you're there, but like us down here, like they kind of came onto the scene on Reef to Reef and that sort of thing, and we all just went nuts for it. A lot of that early stuff, like the Wolverine. Some of those early ones where we'd never seen anything like that, even like the Red Dragon, of course.
Yeah.
And but then of course, look what happens then. As soon as something becomes popular, then they go look for more of it and they find it. But I'll never forget, like, just not even believing my eyes seeing some of these pictures, thinking like that can't even be real. And it was like the CJ's Pinky, some of those early pieces that they kind of unleashed on all of us. Yeah. And they kind of knew what to look for.
Yeah, no, he had connections there. I think he's Filipino, maybe, or maybe Indonesian. I'm not sure, but he had family connections there, and early on, sort of knowing what to cherry pick for. And then probably the areas to collect as well, like where some of that special stuff is. But I think that kind of went hand in hand with around the time Reef Raft, because let's face it. I think he was pretty early in the name game thing. Was probably similar to the time where we started to have more LEDs in the hobby too, which I think might have popped some of those colors more, right?
Oh yeah. In fact, I would say concisely that blue lighting is responsible for the popularity of like 99% of what is popular now. Case in point, I had rainbow tenuous in my system under 10Ks years before that, and I didn't give a crap. Nobody really gave a crap, and then all of a sudden shine blue light on them, and they become obviously there's no other example than Mike's Walt Disney. That kind of was just, it was a thing, and then blue lights came around, and all of a sudden it was like, wow, that's incredible. And even torches. I mean, torches were like bargain bin stuff. And just because they didn't look that cool, but they look really good under blue lights. And I think like probably one of the biggest changes in the hobby and kind of what's collected and what's appreciated certainly is the fact that it looks better under blue light, that we can now provide them to look that way, which even with like a 20K halide, you don't get that, and actinics even, you don't get that effect of like kind of what's behind me a little bit, but which it's just hobbies evolve. I don't really have a problem with that. But I think that the divers, even as they picked up on that, because one thing I did notice, you don't see too many blue corals come in anymore because they don't look good. Like they're not collecting them. I always figured that the divers were down there with blue lights now looking for stuff, underwater that reflects, and the blue corals aren't going to do that. They're going to look terrible, so they're just leaving them down there. And I kind of miss some of those nice blues, actually.
I think part of it, I thought about the blue thing too, and I think part of it is that we have such good blue corals in the hobby that they're not selling from an export end. Like, the Cali tort, Oregon tort, some of those torts, you're not going to get any more blue than that. I've got lots of nice blue stags, some blue, really super deep blue tenuous, and it's like I think the blue's kind of covered, but like you say, I mean, it's like in a whiter system, those colors are going to pop more. So like I haven't seen a lot of blue SPS come in. It's true. There's a good
right. It's just because it doesn't really look that great. I mean, I think it's definitively connected to the fact that it just doesn't look as good anymore. I mean, those guys kind of, especially with even social media, like they could kind of tune in to what people like now. I mean, that whole dynamic kind of changed as far as like they could look and see like what someone is selling on Facebook, and then they would go and look for it versus it was a lot easier for them to kind of dial into what people wanted versus just going down and grabbing a bunch of whatever. Again, a lot of kind of some of the weirdest oddball stuff I got way back then. Because they just grabbed it. And they're like, I don't see any stuff like that anymore. Like, just weird stuff. Like, I don't really... Like, Pichones and stuff, and, like, weird deep water, like, the whole deep water craze. Like, I loved all that crap.
Yeah.
And you don't see it so much anymore.
Funny story on that front. There's a shop that does wholesaling and a lot of importing that I buy from. And one of the owners, like, I don't think he's been in the hobby for a ton of time, like maybe 5 years or 6 years or something. And they mostly, a lot of the shipments they bring in would be majority tenuous and millies because, those are kind of the hot
millies and tenuous
right now.
Right. Yep.
And they had this shipment land, and he's like, "Oh, you got to check this one out." And he takes me over to this back system, and he's like, points to this coral, and he's like, "Have you seen this before?" And it's like a Lorpez or something like that, like a pretty, or granulosa. And I'm like, dude, this is a coral we used to get all the time,
right?
And to you, that's like, whoa, have you seen this before? Like, I'm like, that was like, super regular, like 10 years ago, we get those in all the time. So, but
it doesn't like glow under LED. I mean, like I said, I think that really has been one of the definitive drivers of kind of what people want in their tanks. Because they look good. I mean, the thing is, when you blast them in blue, they do look good. But that just it's kind of like, I don't know what the dog chasing his tail or something. I don't know exactly if that's the right thing, but we keep getting like as that stuff continues to look well. I guess I ponder like what's around the corner then. I mean, like what where do we go from here?
Yeah. I mean, what are you kind of like? It seems like your photos are pretty white, like from what I've seen, things you posted.
Yeah, most of the site, I would say like 80 to 90%. And I'm so behind on pictures, it's not even funny. Like I kind of took a picture tank down. Like I have a little, I won't even get into it. I'm just so behind on pictures. But 99%, I should say 89% of my pictures were shot under radiums, which is essentially a pretty white bulb. And I even remember back then, like, if there was even a hint of blue. And another thing I noticed too, like the acceptance of blue photography, and like the acceptance of kind of like, can I swear or no?
Yeah.
The acceptance of like shitty pictures, somehow that like 10 years ago would be like laughed at and kind of run out on a rail. But I would, even if I had a hint of like blue in my egg crate, I would adjust that, because I didn't want someone to be like, look at that blue one, like look at that fake, so I tried, I worked really hard to represent, like, at least under the day, under the radiums, as clear and crisp white as I could.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of what I did back then, and most of the corals were shot under that. I've been experimenting with blue lights and orange filters and that sort of thing, and I'm not, like, I think that's why my photography has I don't want to say plateaued, but has stalled, for lack of a better word. Like, the system that I had that was so great, kind of, as the corals changed, and I kind of needed to represent like that glowing, tenuous look. You can't do that under a radium, So I still haven't really found my groove with photography like I did under the radium back in the good old days, and just one of those things. Like, I'm constantly trying to fix it, but
So, do you have, what are you using for a camera? I use a TG6, Olympus TG6, the underwater camera.
Cool.
And it's, do you not know about it?
I think, my mom is a diver, and I think she has an underwater camera, and that actually sounds familiar, but I'm not personally familiar with it.
Yeah, the TG6 has all these macro modes, and it's just awesome because you can just stick it in the tank. And once
I was going to say, right in the water.
Yeah, so you don't have to shoot through the glass or like a viewer or whatever. So most of all the photos that you see like on my site and whatnot are with the TG6. I think the 7 just came out, and it's like almost exactly the same. So you should check your like local marketplace or Craigslist, see if you can find one for cheap, or if your family member has one.
How close can you get to the corals? Like, would you say?
Oh, you can
like,
get right up. That's the thing, is it's got these macro modes where you can just get like
cool.
right up to it. So some of the videos I've posted and whatnot, they're with the TG6. So it's freaking awesome.
That's cool. In fact, and another one of my bigger hurdles is with my shallow tanks. I can't shoot. I have a Canon 6D and a Zeiss macro. It's a planner lens, fantastic lens. In fact, most of my shots are taken with that. But I can't get, the water's too shallow in my tanks that I can't get a shot in focus. Unfortunately. So I actually had, for the longest time, had a tank set up as like my studio tank. And I'd have to take the coral out, take the frag packs out, and set them up and do all that. But that's how I got good shots. I mean, it was a dedicated tank, and lighting, everything was perfect. And it's came down. I've taken it down. I've set it back up. I'm in the process of kind of rebuilding a new. Oddly enough, just today working on a new tank for that. But it's kind of unfortunate that I can't get that. I mean, I can't really shoot frags. I've got a ton of frags. If I could just do like, I get asked a lot to do like a WYSIWYG. One of my biggest, like, dude, you gotta, like if I put out like a questionnaire, like, hey, what would you like me to see more of? That's usually on the top of the list. I don't, like, short of using my phone, I can't use my nice camera to just shoot 100 frags because I can't get there. It's, my water's too shallow, and it sucks. But I would consider maybe getting something like you've got if it would allow me to do that.
Yeah, the other nice thing I would say about it is you can shoot from a little bit of an angle underwater too. You don't just have to have that direct above view of the coral. So you can kind of get a little bit on the side, and it's awesome. Just remember to close the clasps on the side and keep the water out of it.
I will tell you something. Like my earliest shots, I think the Sniper's bubblegum on the site, I did use, like when I first started my business, like day one, like maybe week one, I did use my mom's, one of her underwater cameras, and I want to say, I think it might have been, it had a big case. It had like a big case thing, and it was real clunky, but some of the pictures on the site, because I never got another picture of that Sniper's bubblegum, are from my old, I had a 300-gallon display way back then, and I just stuck it in the tank and took pictures of my colonies. It worked pretty well. I mean, they were a little saturated, and I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but I think I should. Actually, I thought, I've got an iPhone. Can you stick that in the water and take pictures or no?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're water resistant, but I'm not sure.
I haven't put it to the test. Maybe if I get a new one, maybe but I thought maybe that would be something to try. If you could just stick it underwater and take a picture, you'd kind of have the same effect. But
you can get cases too, but I don't think you're going to get the macro mode that you need to get close enough.
Right.
My systems are 16 and 14 inches deep. So like with the racks, it's like I've only got, I don't know, like 8 to 10 inches from the surface is where a lot of the corals are, right? Or so
I've only got about 4, so
Yeah.
I mean it makes it really tough to do that, unfortunately. But I may look into that. I mean, maybe I'll talk to you after this about that camera you've got, because
for sure. I put
probably
things
one
like
of my
that.
biggest
I put things like that in the show notes too, so there'll be a link to that.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, honestly, one of my biggest kind of, I don't know if it'd be hurdles or kind of the biggest kind of monkey on my back is that my photography has almost came to a grinding halt. And, I got all these new pieces. I send out pieces in battle boxes and they're like, you got colony shots? I'm like, the same song and dance. Well, no, I got this picture tank and yada, yada. I give them this, this little spiel. But ultimately, I just don't have a setup that I'm that happy with anymore to shoot, kind of like I did back with the old halide. And I would take even fluorescence and side light them and stuff. It was a good.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those shots turned out really good, I will say. And once I kind of ventured into bluer lighting, I just never found that perfect point, because it just it never calibrated the same for me after that. But
so I wanted to ask you about how you supply your major elements. Are you using calcium reactors, 2-part? What's your kind of main source?
Yeah, I am all in on the calcium reactor now. I as I mentioned, I kind of dabbled with the kalkwasser, and I just don't think my system wasn't happy about it. And I guess my main again, my backup system was still running a calcium reactor. The main system had the kalkwasser. Backup system looks great. The main looks funky. So that's always kind of my gauge. I have I can having multiple systems, at least you can gauge and see maybe if this isn't happening on this system, maybe it's something like the kalkwasser. Anyway, calcium reactor all the way. Although I will say there was a little blip. I've been using Reborn forever. In fact, before Reborn, there was a media called Gen X media, and it looked just like Reborn, but it went away and kind of ended up coming back as Reborn now. I don't know if it's probably a different company, but just the little skeleton pieces.
Yeah.
Sometime through COVID, the Reborn that we all know and love kind of went away, and it came back as these little piddly little pebble things, and I was a little sketchy. I was a little skeptical about it, right off the bat. I had this big plastic tray thing, and I dumped the whole bucket out, and I searched through it, and I found all sorts of weird things, little magnetic
rocks.
things. I found an actual little diode, pieces of glass, things like that.
Geez.
Needless to say, okay, there was one other thing. There was one other thing that changed too. That now that I realized, that the system seemed to have perked up, and that was that I finally got the Reborn back. I mean, the old Reborn that we all know and love, the big coral skeletons. So I've been running that real small, kind of potentially interesting stuff. And, I think that my tank wasn't so happy with that. But, I've gone, full, since I dropped the calc, I've gone full bore calcium reactor again. I've always ran a calcium reactor, almost since day one, back in the early 2000s. And it's kind of like my comfort zone. I mean, my pH is always low. Again, that was another thing, another facet. I started kind of chasing pH a little bit, and that's kind of what led me to do the kalkwasser thing. And I was running that at night, and the calcium reactor ran during the day, and all that kind of stuff. And even another factor, probably just the instability of it all with the kalkwasser may have had an effect on it too. Maybe not the kalkwasser itself, but trying to do this daytime, nighttime. I don't think my elk was really stable for that whole year. But basically, calcium reactor all day long.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of calcium reactors, for a lot of reasons. I think just because it's such a steady base level of, your main elements being supplied. Obviously there's the trade-offs of the pH. So that's the reason I use calc as well. And then I also dose 2-part, 3-part with the magnesium. But that's more just to give me a little extra, control on the actual calcium and alkalinity levels, so
how are you adding the kalkwasser?
So the calc is just dosed at night, and I have it in it's like an 18-gallon jug, so I make it up about once a week, and it's mixed at 6.5 grams a gallon, that's kind of the Chris Meckley concentration that he's all about, where basically calc pretty much all will dissolve at that. at that concentration. So you don't really end up with this slurry in the bottom. You end up with a little bit in the bottom, but not much. So yeah, but my pH runs pretty high. Like 8.3 to 8.6 is kind of my range. So like what you must
that's
be,
high, I guess. That could be something we could fight about.
Yeah. Well, what about you? Like
I would say,
sitting?
I'm on the low end. I mean, I have a couple mechanisms to help a little bit. I do run the effluent right into my skimmer. That helps a little bit.
Yep.
And I've got a big old heat recovery ventilator that helps ventilate the whole room. But I'm still hitting, low 7.7, and maybe a highest I'll see is 8.2. On a good day when the fans are on, and I mean when I'm getting a lot of fresh air in. But 8.6, I've never seen it. I don't think I've ever seen 8.5, let alone 8.6. So, but let me ask you, like, did you have a period that you were running it in lower pH, and did you notice any difference, with the higher pH? Because that's kind of a recent hot topic as well, it seems.
Yeah, I definitely noticed corals growing faster when my pH was elevated. Okay. Another thing I would say is, like, I think that a lot of the kind of bad mojo that happens in a tank, it happens when the pH is low. Like, it happens, like, my understanding is some of the bad pathogens and bacteria kind of thrive in those lower pH environments. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, even though the coral growth, it kind of makes its own kind of reaction, and the pH is different in the coral tissue than it is in the water. I think you're just really supporting that reaction to happen properly with an elevated pH. And I'm not saying it has to be, I don't think it has to be 8.6. I just think, yeah, you might be at the lowest I would be comfortable with if you're 7.7, like,
right.
Yeah. But
and that's just because I'm dumping so much CO2 in. I mean, if I didn't have well, like, I'll give you an example. When it's really, really humid here in summer, I have to shut my ventilators off, and it will drop, to what seems to be dangerously low levels. And I think, if anything, they can kind of tolerate it for a day or two, even. But again, at night, sometimes they get pretty low, and I guess it's just one of those things that I think about back in the basement days. I didn't even test pH at all, and I'm guessing that I had way low pH back then. I mean, again, didn't really even pay attention to it, but I was inside a house, no windows or anything, and just blasting calcium reactor 24 hours a day. But I would say the ventilator in the shop upstairs has done wonders just to keep it from dipping into what would probably be dangerous levels. I would hope.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's good to get. That's kind of like data kind of showing that, like, you can have really healthy corals with you have really good growth from what I can tell too. And your pH isn't high. It's not elevated. So,
I mean, presumably, I know that a good buddy of mine, Tim, in Ohio, I think he's pretty close. I don't know that he's getting ultra high pH. It blows me out of the water with growth. I mean, I think his pH is on par with mine, and his growth is incredible. I think he's got the magic touch. But I mean, I'm not convinced that low pH is connected to slower growth. But it does seem like higher pH might be connected to faster growth.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that my growth is being stunted by the lower pH, but it might be faster if I had a higher pH. I would not fight you on that.
Yeah, and like, for me looking back, like, my old display was a 180, and I ran only a calcium reactor, and I grew massive freaking colonies, like super fast growth in that tank, and I never even looked at my pH back then. It was such an afterthought.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Didn't even have a meter. I didn't even have a pH meter on my calcium reactor. I just had to dial it in kind of the old-fashioned way. Like, pH was not even like on my radar, at all. But it seems like in hindsight, it's funny to think back. Like, I feel like I'm still chasing the growth I had like in my first tank, and like, no matter how far along I get, like, I still can't match that. And maybe it was just dumb luck, or like hindsight is got some weird blinders on or something. But like, I think about some of my early tanks that, like, without any real knowledge of what the heck I was doing, just thrived, and like kind of became the barometer by which I measure all my future systems by somehow. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but kind of like you said, like,
it's funny looking back to a time where we kind of kept things more simple and didn't look at trace elements and like, we had good results. Like, I don't know, like I don't think I would be able to keep in my older tank, like some of the sort of more nuanced colors of some of these rainbow tenuous and whatnot, I don't think I would have pulled out those colors. But I mean, things freaking.
Well, you might not have seen them if you weren't running
That's
LEDs,
true.
though. That's
That's
thing.
true.
That's the thing. But I agree. It seems like, I mean, there was a time, we could kind of go on all day about like the good old days, but you know, obviously, you know, one of the biggest changes were like nutrients used to be bad, but now they're kind of good, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we can all collectively agree that like zero nutrients is not ideal at all.
No.
And you know, that was one of the main, you know, kind of the main channels of wisdom back then. You know?
So I wanted to ask you, are there any products that you dose that you kind of swear by or kind of really believe in? Like we touched on amino acids and bacteria a little bit. Is there anything else like you've added and you kind of like what it does for your corals?
Yeah. I mean, I should say no. Yeah, no is what I should say.
No.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's a question I do get asked a lot, and I'm really, you know, I have dabbled a little bit, you know, like I mentioned with aminos and you know, back then, like when they kind of like there was a potassium thing, you know, and I've never committed to any of it. It seems like I always just kind of come back to the basics, fish food, except for, you know, my recent kind of journey into trace elements because of the algae scrubbers.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, you know, I've tried some of the foods like Reef obviously, and the Benepets. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
You know, things like that are like actual food. But when it comes to actually, I should back up too. My backup system is kind of inherently low nutrient. I do add nitrate to that. I had like the it's like super nitrate from. I mean, it's like a 5 times concentrate. I can't think. It's got a funny name, like nitro nitrate or something like that.
Yeah.
I have been adding that. It's almost essential because I mean, at 0, I think that tank suffers. But you know, I don't. There's no like. I'm not going to call it snake oil like product that isn't really like just something that claims to do something good.
Yeah.
That I've added that I've ever committed to at all. I mean, it seems like I'll try it out. I mean, I think I've had like when I first started using AcroPower, all sorts of weird bacterial blooms. You know, and then I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. Or aminos in general. Again, maybe I just didn't do it long enough. But I've never committed to any of those kind of additives in that regard.
Yeah, and I think when some people see a benefit, it's, you know, it could be something else that's happening from that product that was lacking. Like I saw really good results in my acros when I dosed flatworm stop. So that's the KZ flatworm stop. That's a product I've been using for years. Yeah. But looking back on it, you know, that bottle has iodine in it. And there's a discussion on the Moonshiners Facebook group that's got a lot of good info from Andre in there. But yeah, like, you know, it's possible that my acros did better because my iodine was low at the time. And maybe, you know, maybe some of the other things in there were just acting as a carbon source, you know, which may have benefited the system at the time too. But it's not always like it's, you know, it's exactly the product that you're, you know, is intended for necessarily. So, yeah, there's no magic bullets.
That's interesting. No, unfortunately not. But I have been curious about that flatworm stop though. Just that, I mean, the claim is that it kind of provides something that makes the tissue stronger, or more, you know, potentially resilient. I mean, maybe not. I mean, maybe a good additive outside of the realm of like to deal with flatworms. That there's something in it that might be beneficial.
Yeah,
you know, that maybe other than the iodine or something. I don't know if there's any definitive data on that, but I've often wondered about that because that's like the one specific product that kind of claims like it like kind of does something chemically to the skin that might make it resilient or you know, even, you know, to bacterial problems or something. But
well, I'm discontinuing it. I'm discontinuing it for a while just to see if things get worse or better. So
yeah, well, that would be a good. I mean, yeah, I think that you know, there'll be no. I mean, a clear, visible example. If you can see that, you can say, "Oh yeah, I stopped doing that, and then I saw that." I mean, that to me, like that's the kind of info that I need to make my decisions on.
Yeah, and if it's the only thing I do at the time, as opposed to 4 things at a time, then I can sort of know that.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Right.
Yeah. Like I changed my RO membrane, and I did this, and I did that. I don't know which one was the right one, but
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's reef keeping for you, though.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
don't change anything before you go out of town either.
Oh, yeah, for
don't,
sure.
Don't turn any dials or anything.
No, don't add a new piece of equipment or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, God, no.
That's where disasters happen. Okay, well, I've been closing. I think, let's see if there was anything else you wanted to discuss. I'm pretty good on most of it, but I do always end on this rapid fire questions, which is kind of fun.
All right, I'll do my best.
Yeah. Okay, so first question is favorite fish?
I'd have to say like some kind of rabbit fish. I mean, it's all like utilitarian fish that eat crap for me.
Yeah.
Probably orange spotted rabbit fish.
Okay, favorite SPS?
Oh God,
it's hard.
Pass. Like
you can say
trade
species
name or like species.
You can be very, very unconventional with how you answer these questions. So, yeah,
that's stuff. I liked a lot of those old like weird like Pachonis and like the simplexes and stuff like that you really don't see much. Like I was always like drawn to those.
Yeah,
oddballs.
Okay, LPS.
I have one LPS that I bought as a frag. This is not a rapid fire answer, but probably 15 years ago. It's a Tyree Baby's Breath Favia,
cool.
And it's just a big blob. I've cut branches of it. It's my only LPS. Seeing as that's the only one I got, I'll just say that's my favorite.
Okay, yeah, I've never seen that one. So, favorite softie? Do you have any softies?
No. No, but I did have an old Paulo Nepthia for years and years and years that I apparently is extinct in the wild now, and I'm kind of sad that I got rid of it. But yeah, just like a neon green. I mean, it had been in I mean, like I think it's still in captivity, but yeah, I do not have it anymore. But
yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about as corals that we might have that are not in the wild anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and inevitably, that might be a thing, and there's a lot of controversy even about if it gets extinct in the wild, is it illegal to have it? And then, like, what happens to hobbyists? And maybe you can save that for another podcast.
Yeah,
but
no, for sure. Okay, light. So your favorite light can be a source of light or particular model.
I kind of touched on that. I do think T5 provides something that maybe other lights don't, but I'm just going to go with old school and just say 65K halide. That'll ring the bell.
Okay. So favorite product line if you use just one product line to run your system. So salt and all the, product lines as a whole.
Well, I've been like I've been like a Deltec guy from the start. I mean, there was a little window where I was a Deltec dealer. I was the only Deltec dealer in America there for a little window, back 2016 to 2020 or something. But I guess if I had to choose like a brand that I like, I guess I'm a Deltec guy. I mean, a skimmer. Although I guess I don't have any other Deltec products, but
that's
if I'm gonna start naming brands, I guess I'm a Deltec guy.
Okay, but yeah, that's on the hardware side. Like I'm thinking if there's a product line, say that does salt, trace elements, all of that stuff.
Again, I mean, it's unfortunate that I have to not say like, oh, I've been using Tropic Marin for 20 years now, and it's like my favorite salt. Based on our little discussion earlier, it's a little iffy, but regardless of the flukes and the quirks that may have happened, like I guess I would still call myself we'll come full circle. Tropic Marin.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Okay, aquarium controller. What do you think's the best?
I have Apexes.
Yeah. Okay. Wave pump.
And in my tanks, gyres. I've got the gyres. It's about the only thing that works in a shallow tank.
Yeah, they're great in shallow tanks for sure. Okay, what is your most hated pest that you've dealt with?
Hated pest. Well, I mean, acro-eating flatworms is the one. I mean, that's kind of the one I spend most of my time trying to deal with. I mean, eliminate and that sort of thing on new arrivals. I could give you the spiel about this is turned back to about 2007 when I had to deal with them personally, but. I see them on new arrivals, and I've got a pretty good system on dealing with them. And my heart still flutters a little bit when they blow off. But I mean, that's kind of like the bane. I mean, that's the bane of at the SP.
Yeah, they're hard to get rid of. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not if you don't introduce them in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if they're in the tank, you got a problem. But if you can keep them from getting in, they're not too hard to deal with actually. But
yeah, just have to practice abstinence. Just
well, people like I mean, I say this all the time, but like I don't make any exceptions at all. I mean, when it comes to new arrivals, like zero exceptions. I don't care even for my buddy Tim, who might be clean, maybe not.
Yeah.
It's a good rule of thumb. Just don't make any exceptions. Even if you think like, oh, Adam's coral's totally clean. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, I'd like to think so, but it still doesn't give you an excuse not to like go through your protocol. Whatever it is you do, even if it's just for practice.
Yeah.
Don't assume that. Don't make any exceptions, and you probably won't get it. You won't get anything.
Well, because the thing is someone that's selling coral could even, have just something that's controlling the population of something to a point where they don't see anything. I have a bunch of those peppermint shrimp in my SPS systems, and I know that they eat some of those pests. So, but it's like, you never know. So, no, I totally agree. Acro flatworm is one of the worst.
Just no exceptions. I mean, it's I've gotten pretty good at identifying. I mean, it's just one of those things. If I find eggs there, it's gone. But
gone. Yeah. Okay, so if you were gonna pick one of these three things to like knock out of the park and the others to be kind of average, what would you pay more attention to? Light, flow, or water chemistry?
I would say water chemistry. I mean, at the end of the day, like it's the main ingredient. I mean, if something's off with chemistry, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Lighting could be. I mean, I would say that's the most important ingredient to me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've had times where I think my water chemistry just hit that total sweet spot, and some acro that fell down the back was like nicely colored and growing well, and didn't have much light, didn't have much flow. So that proves
right. Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the first thing. I mean, like, if your elk wobbles a little bit, that's fine. If you're light, I mean, like I said, my halides are probably 2 or 3 years old. I use my T5s. I don't change until they go out. Usually, I'm really lazy and pretty bad about that. But maybe the corals would be happier with a brand new bulb, but too bad for them.
Yeah.
I've got probably 3-year-old T5 bulbs running.
No, I run them along.
Whatever.
Time too now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so this is a fun kind of thought exercise. Final question. So if you had the financial means to do so, would you do a Polo Reef type tank? So the Polo Reef.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would I?
Would you do it personally?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Just a big, massive tank. Yeah, it's pretty awesome, I will say. I mean, that tank in particular is incredible to look at. I mean, just so many fish, and like all the rocks really got big sprawling colonies.
Yeah.
If I thought I could pull it off, I don't see why I
mean, you have the money to pay good people to do it, but the funny thing is, I've asked a few people this question, and not everybody would go for it. And one really good point was like,
no, it's pretty awesome. One
really good point that Jay Unorthodox Reef made is he said that he would prefer to have it be a public aquarium, and I know and Andrew's really good with having people come and visit and see the system, but I think having it somewhere where the public could witness it would be a huge benefit to inspiring people and educating and whatnot. But they're obviously they're doing that too. They're doing a lot of video content.
Right. I mean, social media would kind of be the next best thing, I would say, in that regard. But
totally.
But, or like kind of make it a pub. Yeah, I could see that point. I could see that, but still pretty cool thing to have in your house.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, what was his name? Bill, he was on Reef Frontiers, the Wisconsin guy. I can't remember his last name. But he was kind of, I mean, I don't know how long that polo has been set up, but I cannot believe it.
Mr. 20, was it the Mr. 20K guy?
No, it was, I mean, this was kind of even before social media, but he was a Wisconsin guy.
Yeah.
And Aquarium Engineering is kind of his company. I just can't think of his last name. Bill... I'm so sorry, I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
But he had a huge tank, and it was kind of like the first time a lot of us had seen a tank like that in his house. It was a big, 20,000, 15,000 gallon tank, and I mean, it's just mesmerizing. It's like, you can do that? That's a thing. And it's funny because I haven't. I mean, I don't know. I last time I talked to him I was asking him about heaters for my system. That was back in 2016. So I guess it's been a while, but and it was brief. It was a brief, just kind of asking about some stuff, but. Yeah, I don't see. I mean, I'm still like a diehard hobbyist. You know what I mean? Even though like my display is just that little thing right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had displays come and go, but if I had the opportunity to set up a tank like that, I don't think I would hesitate for a second.
Yeah, no, it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Okay, well, thanks a lot for joining me. And
cool, man. Well, thanks for the consideration, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, dude.
Super fun.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, man. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
You
okay,
bet.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Reef with Adam Derrickson from Battle Corals. If you want to check out his website, go to battlecorals.com and you can check out some of the awesome SPS corals he has available there. I will link to the resources and products discussed in this podcast in the show notes. And if you have any suggestions for future guests, want to just ask us a question, make a suggestion, make a criticism, whatever you want to say, feel free to reach out at beyondthereefpod@gmail.com. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and leave us a review. And if you're looking for high-quality aquacultured corals in Canada, please check us out at fraggarage.ca. Hope to hear from you soon.